Hi, everyone that's joined us for the Focus General Plan Update webinar. It's about 1 o'clock. I think we're going to start at about 1:05 just to give some time for everyone to join. So we'll be with you in a minute. Thank you. Hi, everyone. If you just joined us, we're going to be starting in just a couple minutes just to let everyone join. Thank you. Well, it's about 1:05. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to kick it over to Carlos Aguirre to start us off.
Thank you, Tara. Welcome to the first of 4 webinars on the Focus General Plan Update for the City of National City. My name is Carlos Aguirre and I am the Director of the National City Housing Authority. The purpose of these webinars is to provide the public with an opportunity to learn more about the National City Focus General Plan Update, ask questions, and provide further input on what is being proposed through that update. Because the general plan is a guiding document on how the city plans for future growth, public participation is invaluable, and we are glad that you have made the time to participate. Please help us by informing your friends and neighbors about the opportunity to participate in these webinars and by completing the survey found on the National City website at nationalcityca.gov/FGPU. We will provide the address on a slide for you as well. At this time, I'd like to introduce the facilitator for this webinar, Tara Lake. Tara is the lead project manager with WSP, a leading consulting firm focused on building resilient and sustainable communities. Again, we thank you for participating. Tara? Tara, I believe you're on mute.
Rookie mistake. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for taking the time to participate in this really exciting opportunity for National City and for those that reside here and work here. We're embarking on a general plan update for focused elements, and this really truly is a time to help plan for your future here in National City. So I'm going to go over the agenda. We're going to do quick introductions and some webinar housekeeping. And then we'll go over a project overview, then an overview of the housing and land use elements. We'll also talk about the transportation element and the safety element, and then we will talk about the climate action plan, and then a quick wrap up. Next slide. So to introduce our WSP team, as Carlos mentioned, I'm Tara Lake. I'm the project manager and also heading up the land use and housing elements. And we have Seth Torma, he is heading up the transportation elements. And we have Stephanie Whitmore, who is heading up the safety and the climate action plan and the EIR. And we have Ryan Whipple, who is helping out on the transportation element, who will also be moderating our Q&A today. And he is also a National City resident. Next slide. And to introduce some of the National City staff, there's a lot of staff that are working on this, and I'm just going to introduce the leads that are working on it. You've already met Carlos Aguirre. We also have Martin Reeder, Ray Pay, Angelita Palma, Myra Martinez, Roberto Llano, Jose Lopez. Next slide. So to go over the format for today, we will be doing question and answers after sections of the presentation. And so in order to do that, if you could type in your questions, as you see there on the screen, what it looks like. So if you go over to the right-hand side of your screen, there should be a question pull down, and you can pull that arrow down, and then you can type in a question. So when we get to that portion, we'll be reading off your questions and then answering them verbally. We'll try to get to all of them, if, as time permits. If we're kind of running out of time, then any others we will get to in writing after the webinar and post them on our project webpage. And we're going to be summarizing all the Q&A there as well. So please go check it out if you have any other questions that want to be answered. Also, you can just call us anytime. We're available, myself and Carlos. Please feel free to call us. We'll share our phone numbers with you multiple times throughout this presentation, and you'll be getting an email after this as well with our phone numbers. But we also have office hours set up, and those are distinct times that we're available to talk to, that we don't have anything else scheduled, no other meetings, etc. So you can call us anytime, but you can also call us during those distinct office hour times, and we are available. We're going to be doing polling throughout the webinar, and that's where the audience members, you can interact and answer the questions of how you'd like to prioritize things in National City. And we'll be going over those results as the webinar progresses. And then finally, this meeting will be recorded, and so you can watch it, if you want to see it again, but also tell your friends and family if they weren't able to make this webinar or the 3 other ones we have coming up. They can also watch it at their leisure on the website, and that's where we'll be posting the summaries as well. Next slide. And this webinar today, you can also listen to it in Spanish live. So please call the number on the screen, as well as that we have the code number there. We'll have this on the bottom of all the slides in case somebody comes in that did not see this slide. Next slide. And there are more opportunities to participate in Spanish. We have a Spanish webinar coming up on September 9th from 6 to 7:30. We also have office hours in Spanish on September 10th from 5 to 6. And we have a survey that's live right now that you can go to our project website, and that it's in Spanish. Next slide. So, what is a focused general plan update? So I was moderating the questions as I saw some people were having trouble with audio, but hopefully most of you are being able to hear it okay. So what is a general plan? You know, it is a blueprint or guiding document for a city to grow and develop, and this is a legal document for all of California cities. They are legally required to do a general plan. And so we're doing one to address, you know, the new state laws that are in place, you know, since the current general plan was adopted in 2011, and also to reflect all the planning, all the great planning work that National City has been doing over the years. So we want to make sure that those are consistent and coordinated. The goals and policies reflect all that planning work that you've been doing. It also will address any regional context and forecasted future growth. Next slide. And so the scope of what we're doing, we're not updating the entire general plan at this point. We're doing a focused general plan update. We're updating the housing element that is required by law to be updated every 8 years. And so we thought, you know, it was a good time to also update the land use and transportation as they go so in sync with the housing, that many of the policies that will be, you know, will come about through the housing element will then also need to be updated in the land use and the transportation. And along with that, we're also updating the climate action plan and safety as well. And then we'll be updating the zoning code and specific plans to reflect any recommendations from all these various elements that we're updating. And then finally, we're also doing environmental review, which is a supplemental program EIR. Next slide. So here's our timeline. On the left, you see our critical path. We will need to be wrapping up with our preferred land use and mobility network in the fall. And that is so that it can inform the environmental review, which needs to get kicked off in the winter. And that is to meet our housing element deadline that the state poses on everyone. And that deadline is April 15th. And so you can see the various more detail on the right of our outline of our scope of work. But I also just point out, this is a first round of outreach, and we'll be doing another round of outreach in the fall. Next slide. So there's other ways to get involved. As I mentioned, there's a survey online right now, and please go ahead and take that and let other people know to take it. We're doing these webinars right now. We have 3 others that are just, they're the same webinar, but they're to accommodate different people's different schedules. We're also holding the office hours. We are promoting all of this through social media sites as well as National City's website. We also are blasting it out through National City's email contacts. And they'll also be doing a round of stakeholder interviews. Next slide. And just to show you what the survey looks like, we're using this interactive platform called MetroQuest. It's been used all over the country, and it's a interactive way to do a survey. It has on these different slides, it has like games, interactive things that that generally make it a little more exciting, more fun to participate. And what they found is we usually get a better participation rate with this kind of survey rather than a several pages of just black and white text questions. So I hope you guys will enjoy it and find it interesting, and again encourage other people to take it as well. It'll be up on our website till early September. Next slide. So here's our first polling question. So what topic area being addressed through the Focus General Plan update is the most important to you? So select one, please. So I think we're just waiting for that polling to come in. So there we go. So we can see that about 55%, so a vast majority, so housing was the most important, then followed by land use, and then transportation, and then safety. Next slide. Apologies, a little bit of lag in the slides at times. And so now I'm going to briefly go over the land use and housing elements. So, what is a land use element? So it designates the general distribution, location, and extent of uses of land for housing, businesses, schools, parks, roads, industry, open space, etc. Next slide. So here's your existing land use map. You can see that, the yellow is residential, so it's largely residential. The purple is industrial. You can see there's a lot of that next to the bay. And then the red color is commercial. So you see a lot of that, of course, in downtown as well as along the commercial corridors. Next slide. And this is an image from the Intraconnect plan that was adopted this year in National City. And in Intraconnect, it talks about how, we should really plan for 10-minute neighborhoods. And what that means is that your kind of day-to-day activities, whether that's going to school or going to a restaurant or going to the park or going to a business office or a bank or the hospital, that those trips, it would ideally be able to get to by foot or by bike. And so this policy document looks at ways that through land use, also through infrastructure, that we really can create that. So this is an example of how land use can help develop, develop the city into something that's more walkable, more bikeable, and that helps relieve greenhouse gas emissions. It usually just makes a place more enjoyable, more just easier to get to places. So this is the kind of thing that we'll be striving for in the general plan update. Next slide. And so what is a housing element? So it contains policies and programs to address housing for all income levels. As I mentioned earlier, this is required by state law. Next. So you can see how today we're about at 62,000 for population in National City, and that will grow to about 85,000 in 2050. And today we have around 17,400 housing units, and then in 2050 it's projected to be about 24,700 housing units. Next slide. So this is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which is also referred to as the RHNA. And this is what is projected for National City, and this is what we need to accommodate for in the housing element. So we need to accommodate for 5,437 units in this next housing cycle, which is 2021 to 2029. And as you can see, they're also divided up into different income levels. Next slide. And so currently we're working on a site inventory, and that is where we show, where this housing can be developed. So it's a matter of where it's zoned, where it's zoned for housing, for multifamily housing, but also it's a matter of if it really is likely to redevelop there. We have to look at parameters of why maybe it's not likely, or if there's government regulations in the way that are impeding development there, et cetera. And so we look at vacant sites, but there's not a lot of vacant sites in National City. It's, basically a built out city. We're looking at city-owned sites. Also looking at the downtown specific plan area, because that's already planned for a lot of density. And we're looking at the mixed-use district corridors, because those are also planned for density and for multifamily housing, as well as what's traditionally also zoned for multifamily throughout the city. Next slide. And just to give you kind of understanding what the current housing plan, what the goals and policies are, I was just going to go through those, because many of these, of course, will apply for the housing element moving forward. So, goal 1, to maintain and enhance the quality of existing residential neighborhoods, conserve the affordability of existing housing stock. Next slide. increase the availability and affordability of safe and sanitary housing for all income groups, provide a sufficient number of housing units and range of housing types. Next slide. Promote and implement fair housing practices and equal access to housing opportunities, and enhance housing affordability through energy conservation and design. Next slide. So I just want to go over just a few strategies of moving forward in this housing element of how we achieve some of these goals. One strategy is, of course, increase housing production. So what are ways to do that? One way is to adopt an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And what that is, you used to have heard these referred to as granny flats, but now the term is accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. And so there are ways to make these easier to get permitted through the city. There's ways to make them more affordable. There's ways to have like permit ready. Some cities are doing kind of permit ready plans that are just kind of off the shelf. So there's a lot of different strategies we can use to have these be more viable for people to build. Next slide. And another strategy is to adopt an inclusionary housing ordinance. So what that is the developer is coming in to develop some market rate housing, multifamily housing, like you see here on the slide, that they also have to, by municipal code, include some lower income housing. And so that way, that really strikes the balance of inclusionary, of including kind of all income types in a neighborhood, rather than creating neighborhoods of distinct income types, but really have them be inclusive of all income types. Next slide. And another strategy is to provide incentives that kind of go above and beyond the state density bonus program. The state has a density bonus program that's pretty good and works fairly well, but you can go above and beyond and really incentivize it even more. And some other cities are doing that. So we'll look at ways that maybe we can even improve upon this program. Next slide. And then another strategy is reducing development costs. And one way to do that is through objective design standards. So by adopting design standards that are not discretionary, this helps to really reduce the amount of time it takes for a developer to kind of get through the government system. And so that makes the project cheaper for them, and thus they can hopefully make it more affordable to people, or also build more housing. Next slide. And another strategy is reducing parking requirements in areas, and areas that are easily accessible by transit. And also, we would have to very carefully look at it so that a reduction in parking doesn't have the parking then spill over into established, neighborhoods. But this has been a great way that other cities have helped increase affordable housing, because building structured parking is very expensive. So in places where it's not needed, because not needed as much as people are taking transit to places, kind of going back to those 10-minute neighborhoods, that in the places where it makes sense, that this is a really viable way to help decrease development costs, and then so therefore increase the supply. Next slide. And another way is streamlining the entitlement process, which also reduces the development costs, which should therefore reduce the price of housing and increase the supply. And so we kind of already mentioned a few ways that might streamline the entitlement process, but there's a variety of ways. And for example, City of Santa Rosa had streamlined their eligibility checklist. So we'll be looking at other techniques to help the entitlement process run even quicker. Next slide. And then another strategy, of course, is support homeowners and renters. Continue those programs that are working today for homeowners and renters. So for instance, the tenant-based rental assistance program, the down payment assistance, landlord-tenant counseling programs, and the housing rehabilitation and repair program. Next slide. So to accommodate the city's housing need, where would you prioritize housing production? Choose all that apply. Again, we're just waiting for the polling to come in. Okay, so vast majority picked downtown National City as where to prioritize housing production. Second was West Side Town, and then other neighborhoods followed by commercial corridors. All right, thank you for participating. So to accommodate the city's housing need, what type of units would you like to see produced? Choose all that apply. And we're just waiting for that polling to come in. So the majority picked accessory dwelling units, then followed by low medium density of up to 3 stories, and then followed by medium density up to 6 stories, and then medium high density, and last high density. Okay, thank you. And so now we're to a section for Q&A, now that we finished talking about the land use and housing. So Ryan, if you want to read off any questions we have so far.
Yeah, Tara, we don't have any questions currently. So just like to encourage anyone who has any questions on those two elements to again feel free to add those questions to your chat question window. We can
Great.
wait a minute or two here.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, and if anybody missed the beginning, we are handling the Q&A through the Q&A on the is it on the chat? Do they see chat? Yeah.
Yes.
And so yeah, to pose a question, and we'll be answering those in these after each section.
All right.
So
Tara,
you'll have other time.
We had a question come in. Will landlords raise rent if ADUs are added to properties?
Well, that's a good question. And I interpreting that to mean like raise the rent of the existing unit rather than the one that gets added to it. There's no one answer for that. It really depends on case by case. We do, we're going to be striving for communities, neighborhoods all throughout National City that are inclusive of all incomes. So, we don't want anyone to be displaced. So all of these methods kind of all together help provide variety of income level housing, provide a lot of choice in housing types. So ideally, the ADU provides a more affordable housing option because it's much smaller than the single family home that it's next to. So the idea is that it provides more affordable housing option. But I guess the question is, but does that end up raising the rent for the existing single family? Because if it increases maybe that property value. So that is certainly not the intent, but that is something that we will look into, because yeah, sometimes when these good things happen of providing something that's lower affordability, but does that increase then of course the property value of the entire place? So it's definitely something to look at. These the ADUs, can provide a place for multi-generational housing. Maybe it's other family members that live there, or it can be rented out, to anyone, or it really can provide, an additional housing unit to the supply. So the idea is that this does not kind of provide, this doesn't enhance like displacement. I don't think that that's really what would be happening with ADUs, but we'll definitely look into that more and provide more of an answer. Thank you.
All righty, we've got 5 more questions that have come in, so I'll try to go through them quickly.
Okay.
The first one here is, are you going to require architectural uniformity that beautifies the city?
Architectural uniformity. Well, we are going to be creating objective design standards, which people might be used to what is traditionally called design guidelines. Those are, a lot of cities have those, but I wouldn't call it uniformity. I mean, the uniformity sounds like to me that the entire city would then have the same architectural, standards everywhere. I think, most people appreciate that neighborhoods are different from each other and have a different character, et cetera. So also, a single family neighborhood might have a much different character than a medium density or a high density. So any kind of design guidelines, I think, would be really reflective of what's already there, what's already, the character already established. So I would answer it that way, but also the objective design standards are a way for developers to develop a project and not have to through what we call the entitlement system. This means that doesn't, if it meets criteria, that then doesn't go to city council. And so that way, if they abide by these design standards, and it can improve staff. So those will be relative and though to each location. So I wouldn't say it's architectural uniformity throughout the entire city.
All right, thank you, Tara. Another question. It starts with a statement: high-rise construction doesn't work in National City. What will the city do to accommodate more micro units? What bonuses, what incentives?
All right, thanks for that question. Yeah, I would agree that high-rise construction doesn't work in most of the city, but in downtown, there have been some projects, and I think it can work downtown, but in the rest of the city, yes, I don't think that it pencils out. And micro units, they already can be built with the code today. There's a project that's underway, under construction in downtown right now that are essentially is all micro units. But I think we'll look at a way to incentivize them, to make them easier for developers to build, because that is another great kind of tool in the toolbox of providing more housing, is to make it easy and enticing for developers to build micro units. So I see we have a lot of questions coming in. Can I do a quick time check with Emma?
We have about 7 minutes left
In this section,
including the extra time.
Okay. The next question, Ryan?
Yeah, no problem. You're giving multiple webinars, and it stands to reason that people attend at different times because of their work-life schedule. How will you account for their input reflecting different needs?
Yeah, so yeah, that is a good point, that what's going to be different about each webinar is the questions we're going to get. And so all of those questions will be answered, you know, we're hoping to answer them all verbally like we're doing now, but we'll also be taking notes and provide a written Q&A. So all of those will be posted online. So if you're curious about, you know, any other questions that happened at the other webinars and to hear what the responses are or were, that you can go to the website and check on those. You can also call us and we can talk to you too about what ended up being covered in the other webinars through the Q&A.
Next question. Does the homeowner need to live in the main house or the ADU in order for the ADU to be allowed?
That's a good question. You've probably seen in the news a lot of, you know, a lot going on about whether or not Airbnbs should be allowed. So I know each city is kind of, you know, are kind of coming up with their policies right now. I know the city of San Diego is in the process of that. But right now, if you build an ADU, you can rent it out and not be living in that residence. But I believe it does need at least a 30-day lease. So that way it does prevent, you know, renting it out for two nights. So that, yeah, is not the point of ADUs to become vacation rentals, because these are in single family neighborhoods, and it's really to help, you know, help the supply of housing. So, but we'll, you know, that'll be something we'll be looking into throughout this process too, because as you know, it is a topic that's, you know, all cities kind of facing right now.
All right. Next question. Is there a plan to facilitate ownership instead of leasing a dwelling unit to residents that rent an apartment?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's plans in place now that help people become homeowners, you know, whether it's help with, you know, down payment or that first time loan for first time home ownership. So there will continue to be programs like that, and we'll look at those and what, you know, and what we can do to enhance those or make them better. But yeah, that's definitely part of the equation is how to get more people to own homes, and because then they can, you know, build equity, build wealth through that home ownership.
All right. Next question. Could new homes be built west of Freeway 5? Why is this so heavily industrial zoned?
That is primarily industrial zoned. It's, you know, if building homes next to industrial uses, you know, it depends on the industrial use, but usually it's not a it's usually it can be, you know, not a good thing for environmental reasons. But I don't know if Carlos, do you want to add anything to the, you know, residential housing being built west of I-5? I think you're still on mute.
Sorry, I went the reverse. Typically in industrial zones on the west of 5, that is no longer allowed. If there's a rezoning of a tourist commercial area or an area closer to the Bay Marina, there's a potential for housing, but if it's purely industrial at this time, there's no longer the ability to develop housing in light industrial zones west of the 5.
Thanks, Carlos.
Next question. Traffic is already congested due to traffic islands. More homes are a safety hazard during emergencies. For me, I don't have a driveway and people come from other blocks to park here. Will people like me be able to get assigned spaces?
I'm sorry, Ryan, could you read that question one more time?
Yeah, so several statements started. Traffic is already congested due to traffic islands. More homes are a safety hazard during emergencies. For me, I don't have a driveway and people come from other blocks to park here. Will people like me be able to get assigned spaces?
I don't know if I understand the question entirely. I guess because of the part with because they don't have a driveway. But in the assigning of spaces, so that's probably talking about parking on the street. So we'll be looking at parking, and currently the city does have some reserved parking for people that live in a neighborhood that they're able to, only residents can park on those spots. So it's something we'll be, potentially looking at of do we develop, more of those zones throughout the city. But so thanks for your question. And I mean, it's definitely something for us to consider.
Hey, Tara, it looks like we are out of time for this section.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Because we're only scheduled for an hour and a half, so we want to make sure we get to the other sections as well, and to some of the other Q&A as well for the other sections. But the questions that we didn't get to, we will answer them and post them online. So thank you for all those questions and keep them coming. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth, who's going to go over the transportation element. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Transportation has a rich history of connecting people in National City. And National City has a rich history of transportation. It featured one of the first commuter electric rail car systems through the city, as well as the first light rail line, the Trolley Blue Line, in the country. The expansion of the freeway system provided benefits in terms of more access to other parts of the San Diego region, but at the same time, it cut across multiple communities and divided multiple communities within National City with the construction of the I-5 and the 805. And so the transportation element on the next slide pausing here for a moment. There we go. Really is the blueprint document that guides the city's future decision-making related to transportation within the city. That's what it does, similar to the other elements. And on the next slide, the transportation element addresses all modes of travel, from pedestrians to bicycles, public transit, vehicles, goods movement. Here you can see we talk about new mobility, we'll describe that further, and other programs and policies that affect transportation. So it is comprehensive in what we're trying to achieve and look at. Next slide. It's important to note that in this process, we are not starting from scratch. Not only are we starting with the previous community plan transportation element that was updated about 10 years ago, but there have been a lot of projects and plans that you may have even yourself been involved in over the years. And we're gonna not ignore that information, we're gonna really just build on that information through this process. And here we've listed some of the more recent city efforts that we're building from. And as mentioned earlier, we're in the midst of finishing the existing conditions process. And as part of that, again, we're building a lot from that, from those other plans that were already developed. But we're also here today, part of it is to engage with the community to understand your perspective on it so that we have a really comprehensive understanding of existing conditions. What we can see here is, as part of that work, we have documented where missing sidewalks are, shown in green, and where recently completed sidewalks have been constructed, shown in pink or purple. On the next slide, we've also documented where both existing and planned bicycle facilities are, both within the city and how they connect to some of the regional projects. We have done the same for public transit, as well as for the vehicle roadway network and goods movement and parking. As part of existing conditions, the on-lane survey that Tara mentioned earlier, MetroQuest, today's survey, and any follow-up information you give us will help us to understand and give more details on where you would like to see further sidewalks, more bike lanes, or identify where you'd like to see other street improvements. So the transportation element is being driven by four kind of major pillars shown here. The first one, shown on the next slide, is safety and resiliency. Safety is really at the heart of what we're trying to achieve, a safe transportation system that works for all. And that is key, that network is key to community well-being. By reliability, we mean a robust and resilient transportation network that safely accommodates not just all users, but also maintains access for critical lifeline services, like emergency services during a fire, a flood, etc. So safety and reliability are at the top of that list. On the next slide, transportation also plays a key role in connecting people with the goods and services they need. And here, we want to ensure that this plan will focus on what transportation policies and plans can support national cities' economic growth. Next slide. Part of our overarching goal is to ensure that national city residents have quick, safe, and convenient access to the places they want to go with a national city. Hence, accessible neighborhoods, places like parks, schools, and your favorite shops and restaurants. On the next slide, there have been many recent advances in transportation technology, some of which I'm sure you've seen, from the scooters and the electronic scooters and bikes that you see in the community, to neighborhood electric vehicles, to coordinated signal timing, something that works behind the scenes. And so what we want to do is make sure that National City has a plan to address these new technologies, as well as other technologies that will be coming in the future from 5, 10, and 15 years out. We want to make sure that we're ready for both. So with that, we want to use a few questions to help better understand you as participants and your transportation needs. So we're going to ask a few questions. The first one is, what types of transportation do you generally use, and choose all that apply? Okay, we're waiting for the polling here to come in. And as I saw earlier, it takes just a few moments. Okay. Wow, interesting results here. So 79% of you responded the private automobile. Next was walking at 60%, then public transportation, followed by bicycles, and then rideshare. The next question is, what influences the type of transportation that you chose? And then choose all that apply. What influences the type of transportation you choose? And again, we're going to wait a few moments here as the polling results come in. So two come in closely together: availability and access, followed by time, how quick it is and convenient. Then safety, followed by cleanliness, and then finally cost. The next question is, what types of transportation improvements would you like us to focus on in the transportation element update? Choose all of those that apply here. We're going to wait for those polling results to come in. Okay, so in first place today, we have streetscape beautification, which includes trees and landscaping. Second is pedestrian improvements, sidewalks, etc., followed by public transportation, and then a tie for the private automobile and bicyclists. Thank you for your input. And again, we use that information to help us in developing the plan, the transportation plan. We also wanted to note, if you have specific locations where you'd like to see a pedestrian or bicycle improvement, or some of that streetscaping that and beautification that you indicated, please follow this link. You can indicate right there on the map exactly where you'd like to see that if you do have the idea, or just tell us where you see a problem out there that needs to be fixed, whether that's speeding traffic or whatever the case may be. You can enter it here and let us know. With that, you'll help us develop a better transportation element for the city of National City. So we'll open it up now, Ryan, to general questions and answers.
Alrighty. Right now we only have one question, and that is, there is a plan from the Regional Plan 2021, plan to establish a mobility hub. How is this aligned with the RTP and the new bold vision for the only 2 trolley stations and the congestion on Mile of Cars Way and Wilson Avenue, as well as the connection with East National City Boulevard and 24th Street?
Okay, that's a several-part question. So if I forget a part of it, help me remember the last. The first question is related to the regional plan, and there is a regional plan update going on right now, led by the Metropolitan Planning Organization, SANDAG. They call it the 5 Big Moves. We're very aware of that plan. That plan does indicate potentially a new transit access that will provide additional public transportation options to National City. As part of that, the stop where that transit access actually stops, they're calling those mobility hubs, and they envision a robust stop that includes a lot of connections to the local community to maximize the usefulness of that transit stop. That plan is ongoing and will continue to be refined over the coming months. And what our team is doing is going to be coordinating very, very closely with SANDAG as that plan is developed, refined, and finalized to make sure that the plan that we develop for National City with you is a plan that addresses both nearby cities improvements as well as the regional improvements. So we want to make sure that we know what's going on with that at all times and are addressing that in our study. In terms of congestion on mile of cars and the extra congestion, I think generally speaking, transit and new options, new ways of people getting around to the places that they need to go will help lower the amount of congestion out there. If we can use transit because it gets faster and more convenient for us, then some people might choose transit over taking a car to work. And so with respect to how this new mobility hub might affect things, certainly that's something that we'll be looking at. But if anything, it will provide you as residents, if they do indeed, if it finalizes that there will be a new stop there, it'll just provide you more options to get where you need to go. What were the other parts of that question, Ryan?
The some specifics on the how that's going to be connected to the 2 trolley stations, and then congestion on Milo Carsway and Wilson Avenue, and the connection with National City Boulevard and 24th Street. So tying into that station.
Okay,
Specific
I
congestion.
believe I've seen the draft plan. It's actually been, I've seen several draft plans. The latest draft plan does not show that new mobility hub right at the existing location where the trolley has their stops. It's showing it in a different location to the east. That being said, that's a process that will be refined, and we expect that that potentially to change over the coming months, and we're gonna look at that and address that carefully. So the answer is it doesn't affect the other 2 trolley stops. It's yet another transit stop in the city, east about, I'd say about 6 or 8 blocks.
It looks like we are out of time for this section.
Okay. Do we want to, Tara, answer one more question, or should we move on? You're on mute there.
Sorry about that. On for now, and if time at the end, we'll ask some more or get to some more. So with Stephanie.
Hi. So as part of the general plan update, the city will also be undertaking a focused update of the safety element. The safety element, just like the rest of the general plan, was adopted in 2011. The safety element generally addresses issues associated with both natural and man-made hazards, including short and long-term risks from fires, floods, landslides, different types of climate change risks, including higher temperatures and sea level rise, and emergency response, including emergency response to natural and man-made hazards. And it also addresses issues with hazardous materials and brownfields. Next slide. So regarding the safety element, the contents remain generally the same from the 2011 update. There were several pieces of state legislation that require safety elements to be updated for certain purposes. And the most substantial change in the safety element that you'll see with this update will involve a new section on climate change adaptation and resiliency. Next slide. In regard to natural hazards, we'll be looking at a series of updated exhibits that show updated hazard mapping for a number of topic areas. As can be shown on this slide, the floodplain maps in the updated element will show the new FEMA 105-year floodplains located within the city. They're mainly along the Sweetwater River. And they show where these floodplains are relative to critical public facilities, including libraries and hospitals, police stations and fire stations. And the updated mapping will allow the city to plan accordingly for infrastructure improvements and also for the placement of future critical facilities. Next slide. Another exhibit that will be updated to provide new and updated information is relative to wildfire hazard within the city. The new wildfire exhibit is shown on this slide, and it is sourced from CAL FIRE. And as can be seen on this slide, the majority of the city is built out and urbanized. The city has a low fire danger. However, there is a high fire hazard danger area located directly to the east within the unincorporated areas of the county. Next slide. So one of the other items that the safety element does look at is emergency response and disaster preparedness. As part of this update, the city will be looking at updated emergency response times from both the fire department and the police department. We can see on the slide that the average response time for the fire department is a little bit over 6 minutes, and for the police department, a little bit over 5 minutes, and that's for emergency 911 calls. And continued coordination will be required with those departments as part of this safety element update. Next slide. Another topic covered in the safety element is brownfields. Brownfields are maybe not known to everyone, but a brownfield is a site within the city limits. It could be developed or undeveloped, but it is a property that has known or suspected presence of hazardous materials, some sort of subsurface contaminant potentially associated with past use of the site. Brownfields are generally considered difficult to redevelop. First of all, there are real costs associated with remediation of the site, and then there's real and perceived issues of risk associated with liability and the continued presence of hazardous materials within the property. Why brownfields are important to the general plan update process is that they do provide a unique opportunity for additional infill development within the community. These sites are typically very underutilized, and once remediated, they can be used for additional housing or mixed use development. Other hazards within the city, Other hazards within the city will also be evaluated. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the new section being added to the element, which includes climate adaptation and resilience. I think we all are aware by now that climate change poses a spectrum of risks to communities. The risks most likely to face national and city include a number of extreme heat days, an increased frequency and intensity of precipitation, and also sea level rise. The updated element will evaluate the extent of these risks to the city using a mapping tool that has been developed by the state of California called CalAdapt. And it will look at these risks based on varying emission scenarios into the future. The greater amount of greenhouse gas emissions into the future will likely translate into greater risks for the city relative to these issues. Finally, the updated element will include policies and a number of actions that the city can take to hopefully address climate change, adaptation, and resiliency within the community. Next slide. And this is our polling question. So we would like to hear which safety element issues concern you the most. Feel free to choose all that apply. Natural hazards, crime and emergency response, hazardous materials and brownfields, or climate change adaptation. And we're just waiting for that poll to come in. And there we go. There is the response to the poll. So clearly the main concern is crime and emergency response within the city. All other issue areas appear to be fairly balanced in terms of their level of concern, including natural hazards and hazardous materials, along with those risks associated with climate change. Next. Okay. Ryan, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we've got a few here. The
Great.
first one is with regards to the safety plan, are you going to implement any measures to stop human trafficking along 5th and Roosevelt, since that will put the new eateries and visitors in danger there if not stopped?
Okay, that's a very serious question. Generally speaking, I think that particular issue is outside of the scope of what is addressed in the safety element. However, that is an issue that we will bring back to city staff, and they will address, with relevant city departments, including the police department primarily, I would assume, to understand what additional efforts may be needed within this portion of the community.
Thanks, Stephanie. Another question here. We don't currently have signaling with regards to natural disasters that provides information on exit routes. We urge to have signaling with several languages or images that allow people to properly evacuate in case of an earthquake or tsunami threat. Can this plan make it happen?
That's a great issue that you bring up. Typically, evacuation routes are identified within communities and are labeled, especially within coastal communities. We will be addressing emergency response and preparedness. This is also addressed through the county's multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, and we'll be ensuring that any updates to the safety element are coordinated with that plan, along with any existing emergency response and evacuation plans. But increased signage is definitely a topic that we will address with staff.
Great. Another question here. The 18th Street Basin has been allowed to flood since the city started developing the Mile of Cars. The lack of investment to help buildings move back out of the floodplain and reconfigure the street is an environmental justice issue. Habitat restoration and a natural corrective drainage plan is needed to allow us to coexist with the creek. It is time for a solid plan to close 18th Street from Coolidge or Harding to National City Boulevard and build a multi-purpose open space. Is this something that could be addressed within this plan?
I think it's something that needs to be discussed. The safety element does look at flooding hazard risk areas and is intended to identify policies that result in tangible improvements within the city's capital improvement program. As for changing the land use and closing a street, that issue obviously transcends just the safety element and becomes a land use and circulation issue as well. So that will need to be a conversation, again, that we have as we move forward with development of the Focused General Plan update.
Great,
Looks
thank
like
you.
we are just about out of time.
Okay, thank you, Emma. We'll have additional questions that we'll need to respond to, it sounds like, Ryan?
Yeah, we've still got a few more.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the Climate Action Plan. So I believe it's widely understood that climate change is an accepted phenomenon. Just a little overview and refresher. The concept of climate change is well scientifically documented, that human-generated greenhouse gas emissions do contribute substantially to the greenhouse effect, which is illustrated on this slide. The greenhouse effect is the effect in which heat is trapped within the Earth's atmosphere that ultimately results in higher temperatures, rising sea levels, and a number of other harmful conditions to both man-made and natural habitats. Transportation sources, such as vehicle exhaust and also emissions from power generation tied to energy consumption, are largely responsible for the majority of emissions around the globe. Next slide. So in terms of the Climate Action Plan update, the city did adopt a Climate Action Plan in 2011 in conjunction with the last Comprehensive General Plan update. It was a very early adopter of a Climate Action Plan. There are not many that date back that old. So it is time to revisit some of the priorities addressed in the Climate Action Plan. Generally speaking, the plan guides the city in reducing its contribution to climate change. It's comprised of 4 basic steps. First, the Climate Action Plan undertakes an inventory of all greenhouse gas emission sources within the city. We'll talk more about what that inventory is composed of in a minute. The second step is to create emissions reduction targets into the future. Where do we want our emissions to be within the city in 2030 and 2050? The next step is to work with the community and the public stakeholders to identify modified mitigation strategies to look at what had been proposed in 2011, what's worth keeping and what needs to be revised in terms of where we are today with technology and other changes. And then finally, the Climate Action Plan includes an implementing matrix of action items and a monitoring program whereby the city can track its progress towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So first I mentioned the first step is conducting an inventory. What you see here on the slide is actually a pie chart that represents the emission sources within National City. We have not completed the inventory yet, the updated inventory. So this shows where things were in 2005 and is taken from the adopted 2011 Climate Action Plan. Clearly, as can be seen on this slide, transportation sources of greenhouse gas emissions represented the largest contributor within the city. Followed next by commercial and industrial energy consumption. And we will be updating this inventory and are in the process of doing so as part of this update. Next slide. So the next step, as we mentioned early on in developing a climate action plan, is to develop targets and also to address forecasts of where emissions would be in the future if we chose to do nothing. And again, this slide is taken from the 2011 Climate Action Plan, where we can see the emissions in 2005 and what they were projected to be in 2020 and 2030. We'll be taking a similar approach with the updated Climate Action Plan and forecasting community-wide emissions into the future. We'll also be looking at a 2050 target year as well. Next slide. The next step will be to identify appropriate emissions targets for the city. We have a slide here that shows the state's overall emissions targets and trends. Generally, the city will look to adopt emissions targets on a per capita basis or per service population basis that are similar to the state of California's in order for the city to demonstrate its commitment to the state, helping it achieve its reduction targets. So the good news is that the state did meet its 2020 reduction targets as they had been estimated previously and set. And now we're looking to setting 2030 and 2050 targets. It's going to be substantially more challenging to meet 2030 and 2050 emissions reduction targets for a few reasons. First of all, the state and local communities have already done so much. They've already achieved most of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, in terms of achieving emissions reductions. So have to get more creative. And then also there are a number of state and federal emissions reductions mandates that expire in 2030. And so we'll have to grapple with that as well. The next step is to, as we mentioned previously, look at different emissions reductions strategies. These strategies that are on this slide are sample strategies from the 2011 Climate Action Plan. The strategies are generally broken into categories that look at all of the various emission sectors, including energy and transportation and land use, and then to a lesser extent, waste, solid waste, and wastewater. Some example types of strategies that had been considered and may continue to be considered, including improving energy efficiency. There's a variety of ways to do that. To encourage the use of renewable energy, including community choice energy or community choice aggregation. Also to encourage building energy audits and to understand our energy use patterns. There's a number of transportation and land use solutions that we'll be looking at concurrently with the updates to the land use and circulation elements that include improving our multimodal systems, encouraging walking and riding bikes, encouraging the use of transit. And finally, there are some solid waste and wastewater solutions that can continue to be evaluated and addressed, and that includes incentives for waste recycling and composting, and also use of gray and reclaimed water within the city. Next slide. So what are the next steps for the Climate Action Plan? Global warming is a worldwide issue, and honestly, it can seem quite overwhelming at the local level as an item to tackle as part of a general plan update. However, in reality, there's a lot that can be done by the community at large and by individual households to help reduce their carbon footprint. Much climate action plan directly correlates to individual choices, and those are things that can be facilitated and encouraged through the general plan update. There will be additional outreach to the community relative to climate reduction and mitigation strategies that best work in National City. I think we have a polling question next. What emissions reducing activities do you currently participate in? And please choose all that apply. Still waiting a minute for those polling results, it looks like. All right. Excellent. It looks like more than half of the participants participate in at least one or two reduction strategies, and that's great, including landscaping with drought-tolerant plants, which reduces water consumption, and different forms of alternative transportation. Excellent. I believe we have a second polling question. Okay, what strategies would you like to see National City implement to reduce emissions? And again, we'll be reaching out to the community for this more, but please select all that apply, whether that's modes of transportation, incentives for financing renewable energy projects, increasing recycling and composting, or pursuing community choice energy. All right, we have some results. Excellent. Incentives for renewable energy projects pulled very high, but everything pulled high. It looks like the community is interested in a variety of different options for reducing greenhouse gas emissions within the city, so that's great. Thank you. And Ryan, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple here.
Great.
The first one is, what plan or plans do we have in terms for solar panels? For instance, will the city offer homeowners rebates or incentives for opting for solar panels?
That's a great question. As part of this continued development of the climate action plan, we'll be addressing those types of incentives and to put forth some things that may work for the city. I don't know what at this point in time the city will choose to move forward with in terms of incentive programs, but certainly we should be considering some of those.
Great. Next question here. What plans do you have in place for water conservation?
Again, we're going to be developing the strategies. I believe the city encourages drought-tolerant landscaping, but certainly there are more water conservation measures that the city can choose to implement or require. And we'll be evaluating a number of those. And if the community has specific programs or ideas or incentives for water conservation, those are the types of things that we would like to hear about as we develop the strategies in the CAP.
Perfect. This one's a statement that they'd like us to be aware of. Please coordinate with the county's APCD AB 617 committee and their community emission reduction program in development for the latest update on strategies to improve our health and climate.
Noted. Thank you.
Alrighty, that's all the questions that we have currently for the climate action plan section. So we have a few minutes left. I'll defer back to Tara.
Great, thanks, Betty. So we're almost at the end here, just a few minutes left. So I wanted to thank everybody so much for participating, and thank you for all your questions. I'm really excited that there are so many. It means you care and you're curious, and so we're gonna take them very seriously. So we are gonna get responses to all those questions, very comprehensive responses. So look for those on our website. We'll probably send an email out letting you know when those are available, because some of these we are gonna have to confer with some other departments. So we're gonna get those answers for you. So again, just a reminder, please take the survey. We have other webinars coming up. If you know people that couldn't join us, let them know about it. And again, please call us during office hours or any other time. And please also attend the Spanish webinar that we'll be holding in September 9th. And so with that, I just want to thank everybody and also let us know any feedback on this webinar. Typically we would have done this in person in a workshop, but because of the pandemic that we're in, we are having to do this virtually. So I hope you found it useful and informative, but please give us any feedback. But with that, I hope everyone has a great week, and thank you so much.